Hey, what's up, race fans? Tonight, we went short track racing from the Richmond Raceway, and even though Richmond is technically a short track, it feels and drives like a speedway with all the multiple grooves, and it really makes for some great racing, which is what we saw tonight. Martin Truex Jr. hadn't been having the best of luck lately, crashing out in his last two races, but he would start from the pole for tonight's race in his Toyota, and he was really looking to change his luck around. But Joey Logano would be starting third, and he hadn't won since that controversy at Richmond last year that actually saw NASCAR taking the win away from him. So he was looking to get back to victory lane, and Richmond might be the place that he could do it since he always typically runs well there. And even though Kevin Harvick had won the most races this season, the most consistent driver and arguably the strongest driver of the year was Kyle Busch. Busch had won the last 2 weeks in a row and was looking to do what Harvick did at the front of the season by winning 3 races in a row. But he'd have a long way to go because he'd be starting towards the back of the pack. But just after a few laps of racing, he'd be up to 17th, and Kyle Busch was a-comin'. Kyle Larson, who started second, would start to fall through the field, but the track was going to be changing as the sun set, and Larson was hoping that their car would start getting stronger in the race as that happened. Joey Logano would eventually take the lead from Truex, who would start to fall back through the field to fourth, while Kurt Busch and Eric Almirola would start to move up to second and third. So the Fords, early on, they were again looking tough, but it would be a Penske car out front, and Penske had yet to pick up a win in 2018, and it would be Joey Logano, who we talked about earlier hadn't won since that controversial finish, and he was on the way to getting the job done. With 19 laps to go, though, Kyle Busch was still coming up through the field, so he was still looking like the guy to keep an eye on. He'd gotten all the way up to 6th, and again, it looked like he was going to be tough to beat. But Logano would hold off those two Stewart-Haas cars to win the first stage of the race, and it was clean and green in stage 1. In stage 2, it would be Logano winning again, but he didn't do it in dominating style. Kurt Busch shared the lead along with his teammate Clint Bowyer, and it would be green all the way just like in stage 1, but the racing was actually really good. And as that track changed, you could see it. Drivers would come and they would go. It was pretty neat to see that, actually. Logano would lead, and then he started to fall back, but then when Kurt Busch took the lead, he started to fall back after a little bit, and then Clinton Bowyer was able to get up to the lead, but finally at the end of the run, Logano, his car would come back to him, and he'd get back around Busch and Bowyer to win the second stage. So stage 1 and stage 2 would go to Joey Logano, and most people thought that Joey Logano would go up to win stage 3, but could he do it? Stage 3, Logano would lead them to the green, but he must have missed that setup because he started to fall like a rock through the field. But Truex Jr., who hadn't made much noise in the first part of the race, he was starting to move back towards the front, and he would take the lead and would be out front for most of that until he got held up by Ryan Newman when he was trying to put him a lap down. Newman. That would allow Clint Bowyer to get around him and take the lead after Clint Bowyer was able to catch him. And he'd have it until, cue the Jaws music, Kevin Harvick would get up there and to the point. And Kevin Harvick was a guy that you hadn't heard anything out of until stage 3. All the other Stewart-Haas cars were running in the top 5 and sharing the lead, but Kevin Harvick was just a guy you didn't hear anything about. And then all of a sudden in stage 3, there was Kevin Harvick taking the lead of the race with just a handful of laps to go. But the first cautions would start to wave in stage 3. It had been clean and green, like I said, all the way up until like the last 60-some laps when Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would dive into the corner, and he had Ryan Blaney on the outside of him, so when that car didn't stick, he got into Ryan Blaney, who then hit Cole Witt, who was on the outside of him, and that would cause all 3 cars to spin. And then a few laps later, after the restart, Ryan Newman would bring out the caution when he had a malfunction on that car that dropped oil all over the track. Kyle Busch, he had started towards the back, as we said, and he fought his way all the way into the top 10. But then when he got into the top 10, he had kind of stopped making progress. But towards the end, Kyle Busch had found the magic that he needed, and he would get the lead. And on that last late race caution there, when Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would hit the wall one more time, Kyle Busch's team would get the job done, get him off the pits in first, and Busch would get a great restart over Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin to win his third race in a row. Can you believe it? Kyle Busch goes from 32nd to 1st and completes the hat trick, winning 3 races in a row. And the last time he did that was in 2015. You remember that? That was the year he won the championship. But man, Kyle Busch is on fire right now. 7 top 5 finishes in a row. Think about that. 7 top 5 finishes in a row. I think the last driver to have that many top 5 finishes in a row like that was Jimmy Johnson, way back in 2013 maybe. I think that was. Don't quote me on the date, but I think it was Jimmy Johnson who had that many top 5 finishes in a row. In fact, the only race that Kyle Busch hasn't gotten a top 5 in was the Daytona 500, that wreck fest that we had at the start of the season. Harvick really, he stole the news at the front part of the season because Harvick came out of the box and he won 3 races in a row. He won Atlanta, Vegas, and Phoenix. And then, here we are, we're thinking Kevin Harvick's the guy to beat, but quietly, it was Kyle Busch who was dominating. I mean, Kyle Busch was finishing second to Kevin Harvick, and I was making all kinds of jokes about, Kyle Busch finishing second all the time. But that's exactly what he was doing. He was scoring the most points. He was finishing in second. He was getting those really good races. I mean, he's been the silent stalker. He has. He's been the best car out there. He's been consistent, and he has been scoring those points because he's been right there in every race. He's been in the top 5, and what a great start to the season for Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs Racing in that Toyota, clearly the stronger of the Toyotas. But Chase Elliott would have a really good run. Chase Elliott, who ran 10th most of the night, didn't hear a whole lot from him. He had a really quiet race. He'd get up there in the late race stages, and he would challenge Kyle Busch for the win, but Chase Elliott would finish second, and Denny Hamlin would come home third. And Kevin Harvick would also get a good solid top 5 finish, along with Joey Logano, who was able to battle back to a top 5 finish. But Truex Jr. came up finishing 14th after a really bad pit stop. And so again, Truex Jr. would not have the night he was looking for. But it was a pretty fun race. I think the main story was the coming and the going and that track changing. As that track changed, it really messed with the setups. And no one was ever really to dominate the race, which is good. You never like to see one car just lead and everyone follow the leader. There was plenty of lead changes. I think there was like 6 or 7 lead changes among several different drivers. We saw Joey Logano leading, Kurt Busch, Clint Bowyer, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, of course. So lots of different drivers, but, Ford and Toyota are still the best. Now, Chase Elliott did get a really good finish tonight. He was able to finish in second. And William Byron also had a really good top 10 run. He was running at 6th at one point. He did a really good job tonight. But still, those Chevys are just not where the Toyotas and the Fords are right now. Jimmy Johnson had a pretty miserable night as well in Richmond. I'm sure that he's glad that race is over and he can focus on Talladega, which is where we go next week. Next week we go from our 2 shortest races to one of the biggest. We're going to Sweet Home, Alabama, to the Talladega Super Speedway. Can Joe Gibbs continue the winning streak? Very tough at a restrictor plate race like Talladega, but we shall see. The big news, by the way, for the week, Ford is bringing the Mustang to the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series. And if you remember Penske said that changes were coming, and everyone kind of speculated that what that change would be the Ford Fusion would be going away and the Ford Mustang would be making its return. And we were all right, because that's exactly what's happening. And I cannot wait until the 2019 season to see that Ford Mustang out on the racetrack where it belongs in the Cup Series. Because it's been running in the Xfinity Series for a few years now. So let's and those cars look really sharp in the Xfinity Series. They look way better than the Cup cars do. So it's time to have some hot-looking hot rods, as Rusty Wallace would say, in the Monster Energy Cup Series. But Kyle Busch has joined Kevin Harvick with 3 wins in a row this season. And now Kyle Busch will try to pull off a career-best 4 in a row at Talladega. And that's going to be a very tall order indeed at a track as unpredictable as that one. But if anyone can do it, Rowdy Busch can. You know, he's one of the best there is out there on the track. Good racing tonight from Richmond. I really enjoyed it. Thought it was a pretty decent race. I'm Justin with NRN, the No Bull Racing Network. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook. You can go on Facebook and search No Bull Racing Network NRN to find out all the latest updates in racing and read plenty of articles that we've got up there on the Facebook page. We also have a Twitter and Instagram feed at No Bull Racing Net. That's both on Twitter and Instagram. So check us out there. I'm Justin with NRN, and I'll see you next week in Talladega. Take it easy, guys.